Anyway, I'll get started recording. All right. If you guys could add yourselves to the attendees list, that would be awesome. I'm just going to walk through the agenda. If you have things to add, just add them along the way, and we'll go through them in order. The metrics one, I'll get back to. Okay, so as far as the standard, I'm going through our 1.8 planning doc at this point. So for the standard set of labels, I don't know if you guys have seen the PR. It's been merged. I need to run the tool to roll it out. The decision was to roll out the standard subset of labels being kind, priority, LGTM, approved, a few others. I think Aaron went through and pruned that list and rolled those out to community and test infra. I actually had trouble getting the tool to run. So I'm working with the guy who wrote the tool. It's not the tool itself. It's kind of containerizing it and running it in Docker. But I will look to have that done this week. The good news is the PR actually is merged. I think it was opened a few months ago, so it got enough review, and it was LGTM'd and merged. The bug triage document went in. Did someone have something they wanted to say about that?
Yeah, for the label thing, is there an issue we can look to track the progress of that rollout?
There is. I don't have it right now. It's in test infra. I opened the issue that explained like the compilation error that I was having, or the Docker build error, and Lucas responded to me. I have yet to try his fix. I think it might be the wrong version of Go that I'm using, something like that. But take a look in test infra. The issue is there.
Okay, I'm about a week and a half behind on test infra, so I will get back up to speed on that. My other question was, I think I saw some chatter about a desire to use labels.yaml inside of test infra as an authoritative thing and like remove it from the Kubernetes repo and the community repo and stop copy pasting it across repos. Is that on your radar? Is that part of the game plan?
I saw that as well. I think that was in the Slack channel, right? Or did you see it somewhere else?
Yeah, I think Slack, yeah.
So maybe you have more details than I do, but my understanding is that that subset should just live in one place, though we don't have to update it multiple times.
Okay.
That sort of makes sense to me. I don't know where the correct place is. Was it repo updates? What was the name of the
label syncer or something?
Label sync is the name of the tool, but where do they want the labels.yaml file to live? Does someone have a strong opinion? I don't care as long as there's one copy of it.
Okay, I think maybe we should make sure this discussion lands in the issue that describes rollout, so we can make sure that we're tracking whether or not there's one authoritative labels.yaml file and when or how we should remove the labels.yaml files from all of the other repos. So I pared down to a subset that makes sense to propagate across all repos, but other repos have many more labels than that subset. The main Kubernetes repo has 100 and something different labels. Not all of those are represented by the labels that you're planning on propagating everywhere. And I think we were talking about attempting to use labels.yaml as the authoritative source because I am not sure that public collaborators can view labels, only org members can. But I think in the interest of keeping this meeting short, I just want to make sure that we're tracking that discussion, that design decision is documented someplace and that we're tracking it.
Okay, so document that as well. Caleb, I see that you were taking some notes. Can you continue to do that? Is that all right?
Sorry, double mute. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so the bug triage thing, I think we got that done, have a consistent definition of handling issues. And then we talk about documentation in our planning. And Aaron, I think you did a lot of, everything's assigned to you here. I think, did you finish the labels documentation work?
No. Yeah, sorry, I probably owe you an update on many of these things. Let's see. So I defined the subset. There is no documentation for any of the labels. I can attempt to accomplish that between now and the end of this month. So hopefully between now and the next meeting. Whole request merge requirements, that has yet to be done. Document how owners is used, that is done. Document criteria for adding and removing owners. I will not be able to get that done before 1.9. I got as far as hopes and dreams for what effectively maintained owners looks like, but coming up with the appropriate metrics and the tools to measure those metrics, I will not be able to accomplish. In the interim, the community ladder document, a community roles document, sorry, I'm blanking on this stuff, but a document that spells out approver, reviewer, maintainer, member, things like that, does actually spell out hard numbers. I think maybe there's some question as to how we can measure those numbers and if those are realistic numbers, but that is a starting place. Best practices, let's see, not sure about that. Groom contributing.md, that is not on my radar, never mind.
Aaron, real quick, on the contributor ladder side, do you have a start at that, or do we have a like a draft that we can work off of, or should we just start working off of the I know what document you're referring to as well, the contributor ladder or the membership requirements or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I would, short answer, no. Longer answer, I would like to see coalescing the hopes and dreams at the bottom of the document that describes owners. There's something like we want to make sure that it's not stale, that we want to define responsiveness somehow, that we want to define regular maintenance of these in terms of some sort of regular cadence. So I think coalescing that with the information that's in the contributor ladder would be a good start. But that's the information is in those two places is the most of a start that I have, I guess.
Okay.
Sounds like Paris is curious about this, so she might be helpful to you.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. George, are you on the call? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay, we'll skip over his. I think his office hours is in progress. I think he's held a few at this point. I haven't been to one yet, but it sounds like they're going pretty well. He's also got something to socialize the tooling and automation, some of the slash commands. And I noticed with the milestone maintainer, I had a few people come to me and say, hey, these labels are required, but I'm not an org member. I'm I can't add these labels. I don't have right access to the repo. So we have to do a little bit of a better job with that. For the milestone maintainer, I opened a PR that would link to the bot commands and explained how to add the various labels. But it sounds like even people that are org members that still aren't totally aware of all the ways that they can get the necessary triage labels added to their PRs and issues. So I guess we got to do more with that. And the last one is supporting the release team. Jago, do you want to give the update here? Or I can talk about it a little bit.
Go ahead. It's going to be loud here for a minute, so go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So this goes back to Don's proposal. We've worked with a few teams now. So there are two people from Jago's team that are working on the release tooling automation. And we've kind of defined what the specification is going to be, which is the same thing that Don presented at the community meeting a few weeks ago. I can link to the proposal if anyone missed it. But the idea is right now, PRs are associated with issues are associated with SIGs, and we can use that to improve the release note scraping such that the release notes then can be bucketed by SIG and bucketed by area if the issue also has an area label. So we're going to be able to use these labels to improve the release note scraping process, and that seems to be going pretty well. There were other teams that actually were interested as well. So David McMahon, who is kind of our release engineer, he's the guy who wrote the initial tool for scraping the release notes. I think it's rel notes or something like that. He mentioned that a few other open source teams were interested in the same kind of tooling. Notably, Istio got in touch with us, and they are willing to contribute, I think, as well. They want to understand the process, see if it's working, and try doing it also.
I've also introduced TensorFlow.
To who? Okay. I can't hear you, Sarah. Are you getting really bad echo? Yeah.
I think she mentioned TensorFlow.
Oh, okay.
I did say TensorFlow. The TensorFlow team was very interested in all our tooling as well, so I have pointed them, I believe at you, Garrett, as well as Aaron, to say, here's a bunch of overview, because I sent them to Aaron's community meeting overview from June about all the tooling, and then I think I introduced them to both the two of you, saying that you could help after they look around a bit.
Okay, yeah, I haven't like directly responded, but I'm looking, that's something I can follow up on. I was hoping to get sort of a summary or brain dump from the folks who have been helping Hammer, Prow, and Kubernetes and whatnot into more reusable shape, folks from OpenShift and Istio. So maybe not next SIG testing, but like 2 weeks from now, if that works with TensorFlow's cadence, cool.
So our new community and open source strategy person starts with TensorFlow on the 18th. So I suspect this may be a thing that becomes more interesting after StrataConf. So toward the end of the month.
All right, that definitely lines up with bandwidth post-release. Always good.
Yep.
So quick follow-up on the release notes topic for Kubernetes specifically. This will not replace the need for humans to also take a pass through. It will just organize the information that exists a little better than last time around. It will still require humans to go through and pull out the really interesting, relevant bits and probably augment those release notes. So don't want to oversell what's being done right now.
There's also a painful lack of consistency in how people actually even used the section of the PR for putting that in. So hopefully we can integrate that feedback into the tool and make it better, and also add some sort of bot type reinforcement on the format. That would make me super happy.
Jace, we're doing some internal training. Devin Donnelly, who's one of the writers here, is going to talk to a couple of my teams on how to write useful release notes. We, the engineers, are not the consumers of the release notes, so sometimes understanding the right level of granularity is difficult. Do you think that would be something that's useful more broadly?
Yes, and well, so the people who are working on release notes this time, Radhika and Jennifer, are both very seasoned release note generators and are professionals at it, so they have a ton of experience and specifically understand that audience variance. So I would love to get us all maybe in what makes a good release notes thing, and also get some feedback from our user community to know if this stuff is actually useful. I think just generally speaking, we have a poverty of feedback from cluster users in the field that we could remedy through some surveys or something. And I think that this ties very squarely into that. What is an actionable item? What should it be? What is the way to digest it? How do I know as a cluster operator if I should upgrade to this version or not? All that good stuff.
Yeah, sorry, I was speaking more specifically about the release note automation. And if we're trying to automate some of that from the issues and the titles of the issues, for example, having like democratizing that those messages so that what gets generated from the release note automation process is more useful for the professionals who come along later. Does that make more sense in that context.
Yeah, I think that would be a good meeting. I would love to have the inclusion of Radhika and Jennifer and also myself and probably other people from Contribex would want to be involved in that.
Yeah, Caleb,
Okay.
I hope that's something you want to be involved with as well. He's had quite a bit of experience with the release notes. And I think once we do, we really need to like publicize this broadly. This might be something we want to update at the community meeting on and define the process, define what makes a good release notes, where we're expecting you to put them, and how it's going to be presented and consumed at the end.
%100% to that. Yep.
Okay, then someone also added replacing Munge GitHub with Tide. So I know a little bit about this. There's a design document for a tool called Tide that Joe Finney from, I believe he works in SIG testing, right, Aaron? Has been working on, and he's a huge proponent of Prow. I think he actually wrote the initial version of it and maintains it. And he's got some ideas for moving away from Munge GitHub, which uses polling for a lot of the automation and has some issues in terms of like token usage and latency. And he's got a new design for a tool called Tide. I don't know much more about it than that. But the design doc is linked, and it's probably worth reviewing if you have any automation experience or interested in learning about how we're going to progress with our current automation.
It is a significant improvement in implementation over Munge GitHub. The idea is right now we need a separate Munge GitHub instance for every single repository. That's why it's only turned on for a few repos in the Kubernetes org. By use of the short version is that Tide essentially uses a GitHub query to hit all issues that match certain labels across all repos. And so it can test multiple repos, multiple branches, all simultaneously. It is significantly faster with significantly less API token consumption than Munge GitHub. It is far simpler. It is much more well scoped and maintained. It's going to be a brighter future when we do that going forward. But I think I had raised some concern, I forget if it was in SIG test. Yeah, I believe it was SIG testing that we keep an eye on high-risk changes for the next couple of weeks while we're in release burndown. And Tide was called out as like extremely high. Replacing the submit queue with Tide in the middle of burndown, bad idea. Yes, vigorous head shaking to that. We all have an understanding of how code gets munged into the release branch right now. We do not want to change that understanding. We do not want to change the tools or mechanisms. We want to make sure it's all predictable. If there are necessary changes, we want to make sure that it's high visibility. So Tide is a very cool thing, and I would love for us to talk more about it later, but right now it's like, this is something that's cool on the horizon. It is, again, I'm behind, but as far as I can tell, it's actually been turned on in inactive use in test infra. The test infra repo has historically been something where the author of a pull request is in charge of merging it on their own, and I think we're now at the point where if sufficient labels are applied, you'll see Tide comments that it's merging stuff. So we're getting some real-world usage about it, and I will see if I can get somebody to talk about it at Contribex. If not in the next Contribex meeting, then the following one. I will take that as an action item.
Jeff, you meant Joe, I assume, right?
Yeah, Joe Finney.
Okay. So it's been implemented. The code's been written for it already?
Yeah, it's like in the initial spike is running in test infra for sure. I think it's a matter of gradually evolving, making sure it meets our use cases, making sure it's operationally friendly, it's production ready, making sure it can handle the scale of more repos and whatnot. So it's trucking along.
Okay.
But there is no desire or intent to turn it on in the next month because we're in burn down and we want to keep things predictable.
Awesome. That's great. I like to hear that. But I also want to see a kind of transition from Munge GitHub to Tide to make sure that we understand that we're not losing any functionality. In other words, something kind of like a mapping between the existing Mungers to Tide, or at least a like there's some way of achieving the same functionality. So if there's not a one-to-one mapping of Munger to plugin or whatever the equivalent's going to be in Tide, that there's some means of achieving like the size plugin or check labels or all of the Mungers that are in there.
Absolutely. This is not a desire to replace all of Munge GitHub, mainly the submit queue Munger. There are many other Mungers that cannot effectively be replaced or re-implemented in Prow. We also discussed that briefly in terms of just state of the, so this may be a longer discussion that happened organically in a SIG testing meeting, which hasn't been documented because it's easier for us to just ramble for 30 minutes. But like, we do have an intention to move everything possible out of Munge GitHub to Prow plugins. There are certain things that it doesn't make sense to do that for. We tried to discuss the design constraints for that sort of stuff. We recognize there's a need to get together some kind of roadmap. We articulated this at a high level for 2017 goals as part of our V18 roadmap. As part of V19 planning, we'll be going back and crossing off things that have been done and trying to spell out a little bit more what rollout looks like. So Garrett, to sort of use the analogy to like our effort to standardize labels here within this SIG, there's the implementation of the tool, and then there's actually the plan to roll that tool out, document what we expect the tool to do, make sure that's all working, and then gradually expand it, right? And so that rollout plan, that's where we're kind of at with like, we will need to get there with Tide. We are not there yet, I think.
Okay.
I caveat that by saying I'm like a week behind in terms of what's happening with Tide, but I've seen it merge things in test infra. So I know there is code written and it is running.
So when that plan exists or when that plan happens, can you make sure to share it with the SIG Contribx mailing list and publicize it pretty widely?
Yes.
Thanks. Sarah had a question. Is there a way to turn down single Mungers? Do you have something in particular you're talking about?
I mean, just let me see if I can triage that under the bucket of roadmap to moving away from Munge GitHub. The question that was asked at SIG testing was like, when can we just use Prow for everything? Implying that we wanted to drop Munge GitHub, implying that we wanted to drop Jenkins. And there are reasons that we need to keep both of those around. We tried to articulate that, and I'll see if I can get a roadmap for which things we do plan on moving out of Munge GitHub. That, for what it's worth, you may have noticed, has been split into two instances. There's one that runs just the submit queue, and there's one that runs all Mungers, right?
Yeah, I really like that. Ryan did that, or Cole, whoever did it, that was awesome.
Yeah, and we finally split that up so Velodrome now monitors those separately, so you can see if one is running but not the other, that sort of thing. So like you can watch the commit history for the config map that maps to those, and you can see how we're gradually moving Mungers out that way. But a more documented, broadly, socialized plan, working on that. Cool.
Okay, that answers enough of my question. Basically, I wanted to know that we didn't have to do this whole hog.
Yeah, we can definitely turn down parts of the Munger at a time and replace functionality incrementally.
Fantastic.
Cool. I think that's all we have on the agenda for today, which is good because I want to hop over to the burn down meeting as well. Is there anything else anyone wanted to add, though?
Also, minor thing on my plate, I seem to have poked the bear questioning the myriad GitHub teams that we use on Kubernetes dev. I feel like we had a discussion about this in this meeting a little while ago. I'd like to try soliciting some feedback from people who find the teams beneficial versus people who find the teams to be a bunch of friction. I feel like I got some feedback from this group that the teams were a bunch of friction. I'm going to try and find a way to articulate that and see if we can have that discussion in the open. That's all I got. All right, time to turn it down.
All right. See everyone. Thanks for joining today.
Bye.